What do you do when everything feels like it's on fire? Language evolves as fast as culture is evolving. Welcome everyone. My name is Kim Larson. I'm a client success manager here at Luminoso. And today I'm joined by Ashe as we go over the Luminoso stories. Ashe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ashe Mussbacher and I am the VP of Luminoso. I am here learning as well.
First, we'll start with a brief overview of Luminoso's origin story, because that sets the stage for what we can do today. September 24th, 2013, MIT newspaper journalist Rob Matheson covered the Luminoso startup. Bringing common sense to artificial intelligence is one of the biggest challenges in computer science. It entails equipping computers with shared knowledge that humans use to infer meaning, make connections, and communicate, among other things. Catherine Havasi dedicated more than a decade to such research, amassing an enormous knowledge base from around the web. In 2010, she used that research as the technical foundation for Luminoso Technologies, a startup whose commercial software is helping bring common sense to text analytics. Luminoso's technology aims to quickly mine and analyze vast quantities of online text and, using a database of world knowledge, quickly identify opinions, patterns, and underlying themes in the text. This is the backbone of common sense that allows the technology to spontaneously infer meaning from text. A year later, David L. Harris of the Boston Business Journal shared this photo of our founders in an article covering how Luminoso helped Sony's World Cup social media coverage. From left to right, we have Jason Alonso, who is head of technology, Elia Speer, who is head of our science, Catherine Havasi, our CEO, and Dennis Clark, who was our strategist. Now we're going to do a quick exercise for our research brains, and I'm going to take on the role of a researcher trying to understand the unmet needs of the outdoor dogwear market. So shameless plug. Ashe, what are we looking at here?
That's Emmy and Hunter.
Emmy is my dog, Hunter is Ashe's. So we're just getting ourselves in the right mindset. We're going to do a quick exercise. Ashe, list 3 things you like to do with your dog.
I like to find watering holes because they keep disappearing where I live. I like to use apples from our apple tree as tennis balls and take her for really long walks.
And probably snuggling, because look at that picture.
I know.
So not too bad, right? We listed 3 things. We have some reasonings why, maybe different context around watering hole, like for Ashe's context with Hunter out in the Canadian woods, different from maybe watering hole in Portland, Oregon in the city, which may refer to where we're getting craft ciders. Right? Context matters, like, and we learn that from what is being said around it. Mm-hmm. Now let's do another exercise, and folks in the audience, you're welcome to participate as well. Think of an activity you love to do in the fall, but don't tell us what it is. Close your eyes if that helps. Think about what you see, what you hear, what you smell. If there's food involved, what are you tasting? What's on the plate? The texture of your clothing, all of it. Now, open your eyes and list 5 things you can touch. First thing, Ashe, go.
Candy corn.
Candy corn. All right, what's the second thing?
Pumpkins.
Things that give you hives. Third thing.
Mud. Pretty muddy here at that time.
Sure. Fourth and fifth thing.
Okay. Those sour pop kids or whatever they're called, the candies that go on your hand. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then like a fleecy outfit of some kind.
Okay. Yeah. So you hit a lot of the textures, the 5 things you can touch. A few of those clues, depending on what the people in our audience were listing and the 5 things that they could touch, we may start to bridge candy corn with other things around us, right? Or pumpkins, super common. The hint tells us you're probably thinking of something more to the picture on the right than the woodsy camping situation on the left. Not going to call out wood for probably imagining a woody camping scene on the left with the backpacking. But depending on what we listed, we probably had things in common, right? The fleecy feeling, Wood could have included that in his backpacking imagination. That listing thing still had connective tissue that bridges you with other people's experiences as we imagine different things. that is one way to figure out what is associated with this thing that we imagine without even saying it explicitly. Neat, right? How humans learn. Versus, Ash, if you would humor me one more time, tell us a quick story behind the activity you're imagining.
Okay, when I was 6 years old, I had chicken pox for Halloween.
Oh no.
And I was made to wear this Sailor Moon onesie that was very fleecy, and it just was itchy as all hell. And my mom was like, "Here, to make you feel better, we'll give you this big bowl," and it had candy corns and stuff in it. And I don't like candy corns; they are gross.
Oh no. And that tells us a lot, right? Like, because we weren't going to get that unfavorability sentiment around the candy corn without the story. But the reason why we did these exercises was because our AI understands language like a human. There's a lot of approaches to text analytics and natural language processing and natural understanding that is ontology based, which is kind of like how we learned what words meant in a classroom, where you learn the vocab sheet, you learn the sentence, but a lot of the language we use isn't necessarily taught via definitions, it's taught via context, right? So if we have too many new words or phrases, we lose the word's meaning. Like occasionally I'll go through like pharmaceutical data and it's too much because they're speaking from expert to expert, that baseline understanding is preconceived. But what we want to do is we want to focus on like, what are people explaining it to other humans? One of the reasons why product reviews do so well in Daylight and other Luminoso platforms is because people understand they're speaking to humans in the audience that may not have the same level of understanding. So they'll use different language and bridge it. One of the things that we did in our previous exercises was the mental warm-up, which humanizes the experience of giving the feedback. And people innately offer more detail. Simply putting, describe in as much detail as possible doesn't quite get people over the hump into the mind space and wanting to share. And there's a level of like self-serving reflection and satisfaction in that experience. Product reviews also have that altruistic, I want to help others have the better or informed experience when they do the thing. So that connective tissue between candy corn and bowl and feeling sick, those start to form associations in Daylight's background space. That's the connective tissue that the AI needs to understand the sentiment and the context around different things. And that allows us to learn words that maybe haven't existed before. We'll touch on that later, or things that are being described in less orthodox ways. So one of the things that we want to do in marketing is speak to people in the way that they understand, right? We want to echo back what people are saying back to them, and they go, oh, I feel heard, or yes, this applies to me. One of the data sets that we use is WebMD product reviews. So when you get a medication, people can write a review for it. I didn't know that. We have some great pharmaceutical clients who are like, hey, we would like this data, and it makes sense, right? If you've ever received a prescription, you've gone to the pharmacist and they're like, all right, so these are the expected side effects, don't take it with this. And they may use some language that's not necessarily accessible to folks who like don't have a nursing or pharmaceutical background, or if you've never had the drug before, like, why can I not take this medication with like this substance? Or why do I have to take this thing with food? And they're like, I don't have time for your questions. And one of the things that I've really appreciated about the Daylight WebMD pharmaceutical review product is that the project has 3 focus medications and 2 antidepressants. And it is amazing how many ways people can spell their focus medication labels, right? And because they're being used synonymously or in conjunction with each other, the AI is like, oh, this is similar. Like I'm getting it in context. It's kind of like when we listen to someone who has an accent and you're listening in the checkout, you're like, okay, I'm following. Ash, you're Canadian. What did you say? Or Mari will call me out on this all the time. Like I'll use colloquialisms or idioms that are very Luminoso-esque. And she's like, whoa, that's not a universal thing. And sometimes she gets it in context. I don't need to explain it, but sometimes I do. Over the course of time with more immersion, the more confident our understanding of those unique words are.
So you're basically saying that the Luminoso AI understands if somebody is misspelling something, it'll pick up from context that is related to this or is the same.
Yep, misspellings, or if the competitor or comparable product is so synonymous that it's like Adderall and Ritalin. They help people do homework. They help people focus. Their grades go up. They're more organized. They feel like they're in control of their behavior, but also dry mouth and all the different substance like side effects that come with taking that kind of medication. One of the things that using this kind of listening platform allows us to do is bridge that understanding gap, right? How we talk to others in our community is different than how the communities talk to each other. And the more we listen, the better we can echo that back. One of the things our AI does really well is to adapt at the speed of culture, right? By learning from the data, we can echo back immediately. Spring of 2020, the panini interrupted everyone's lives. The current situation of the spring of 2020 resulted in a lot of people staying home. Do we know what specific event I'm talking about?
COVID-19.
Yeah, so depending on how it's used in that context, the AI caught it immediately. We were doing retail surveys in Australia, and the current situation was something that consumers were using in their retail feedback, recognizing that like going to work and working retail as the world was evolving, the AI caught it as unique to that month because they had not been using the current situation in their retail surveys before. Fantastic. And people weren't calling it the pandemic yet because it wasn't pan yet. It wasn't everywhere. It was just a scary virus.
The phrase that I was thinking of is actually the new normal. So
the new normal is another one, and that one's continuously emerging, and we see it in like voice of the employee surveys and feedback surveys. Language evolves as fast as culture is evolving. So there's some industries that are pretty stagnant and stable. Retail, sometimes, like historically, has been one of those things, right? You get your product, you get the checkout. If you're unlucky, you make a return and talk to customer service. But like very stable, you could build an ontology for fitness experiences, for retail experience, for what it's like to go into the office. But as soon as culture changes and adapts, there needs to be something that captures it in that moment, right? Because you need to be on top of it. You want to find out what's evolving, and you want to know what those evolution terms mean. Luminoso, it's an AI, and that can be a scary word for a lot of folks, but it should be accessible, right? If you're explaining to someone, if you're using a technology, it shouldn't feel magical. It shouldn't feel like a black box. When we understand that what Luminoso's AI does is learns like a human, all that implies is there's a baseline understanding of what words mean. Now I want to talk about some personal experiences that I've learned from my clients and different ways that they've used this baseline technology to do really cool things. I joined Luminoso end of 2018, early 2019, because I wanted to make a difference. I've been in text analytics for the CX phase for like 10 years since I graduated college. I went straight from econ undergrad to working in this experience management space. And when I was in an undergrad, like my goal was to elevate voices, to take care of people, to make people's lives better. And Luminoso aligned with that really well for me. Right off the bat, these stories to me kind of amplify and are one of the things that keep me here. So we'll start with some voice of the employee contexts, some stories that we've used in helping company cultures improve.
I think everybody has a experience with a manager in their life who made their lives a living hell. If I had been given the opportunity to kind of share my experience of, you know, how that person made me feel or how that made my job difficult, then yeah, that, you know, I can think of a handful of them.
So this is the story from a company that had tens of thousands of employees. They have employees all over the world, and they're doing their employee survey as they do regularly, right? This company has, from what I could tell, an exemplary culture. You can see it in the feedback surveys. It's consistent. People love working at this organization. Part of what is going for them in this voice of the employee application is that they take their employee feedback very seriously. There's a really clear communication cycle of, if you speak, I will listen. I will echo back to you what I heard so that you can confirm. And cyclical cycles are made. So culture-wise, strong starting point. I was doing an employee training and we were working on unique to filter, showing what is unique to a specific subset that's not present in other subsets. And for curiosity's sake, we went into what is unique to low satisfaction scores in this specific region, recognizing this region has lower satisfaction than the rest of the company. So we went really quickly, unique to 1-star reviews in this region, not 1-star reviews, but like unsatisfied employees. A specific name came up with a variety of spellings. Like this guy had a difficult name to spell, and it was consistent. Like he's not mentioned in other regions. He's not mentioned with 5-star happy employees who love working there. And the associated conceptual matches for his name were not good. Right? So the HR analyst was like, I think I've gathered what I needed to from this training. I need to make sure that this is addressed. First time training, straight out of the box, meaningful insights. Like you're not going to be going into voice in the employee survey, loading up every manager's name and every spelling variation. Like that is so much work, and like manager names change. So that is the story of that manager.
And hopefully they were able to do something about that and improve the situation.
They absolutely were. They absolutely were. They continue to do their employee surveys regularly. Similarly, this company also has really important benefits that people really appreciate, and they've uncovered insights like, while this benefit specifically is super popular, people who are unhappy with their position mention the benefit as a reason to stay. And if they're taking action on the vulnerable feedback that they're being given, they will be continuously rewarded with, strong employees, happy employees, and the choice of employees that they want.
And I know that's definitely a question that I have coming up later, which is how do we get them to talk about those vulnerable moments, right?
So the next one that was an interesting use case, it's not employee feedback specifically, but performance reviews. You maybe review your manager may review you. If you do 360s, you go around. The organization was trying to figure out whether or not discrimination or bias was happening within their organization. That's one thing to come out in employee feedback, because it may not be outright discrimination, like the one example of that manager. It may be more implicit, and that's really common when we're not doing as much DEI training, or individuals aren't necessarily doing the work to uproot their biases. One of the things that we have the benefit from with an AI is it's only looking at the data. It knows what words mean, but it doesn't know that subset A is for women, subset B is for men, subset C is for non-binary folks, right? It's just looking what's unique here, what's unique here, what's unique here. And it was another unique to filter application where we saw performance reviews unique to female employees, performance reviews unique to male employees, and unique to the non-binary folks. Turns out there wasn't very much unique to the non-binary folks or the non-identified gender folks, but unique to female employees was the word busy. That was not used with the other groups. Conversely, unique to men was hardworking. On the surface, hardworking and busy can be pretty similar, but as descriptors of like thousands of employees in different subgroups, there may be something worth evaluating there. Other terms included as well, but whatever you have in the metadata for the specific stories or the text, do we have any racial biases? Do we have any gender biases? Do we ideally, we would be evaluating because it wasn't like high performers, low performers.
Yeah.
It was just the demographic information.
Does the AI make like language associations between those two, hardworking and busy, as an example?
Yeah, it had conceptual matches, and they may have been from the underlying text science conceptual matches of each other.
Yeah.
But the words specifically were in different subgroups.
Interesting.
Yeah, it really was. So that's data that I would love to get more of, because I'm curious how much of it would be company specific versus like culturally or regionally specific.
Yeah.
Like managers and employee relationships in the geographical US South versus the geographical Northwest versus Canada. Like, it's all interesting, right? How we're talking about each other and how we perceive each other. This next story is about an organization that knew coming into the analysis that their culture was in a rough spot. The goal for this organization was to just figure out, like, what can we do better? What do you do when everything feels like it's on fire? Like, we helped them design the survey to be optimized for daylight. We went over, like, what is storyful data? How do you elicit storyful responses? And what kind of insights are we looking for? Are we looking for sentiment? Are we looking for drivers? Are we unique to subgroups? So the survey design was, I enjoy coming to work, or I enjoy coming to school on a scale, right? So we could use that in drivers. If they mention something, how much do they enjoy coming to school? Let's see that stratification. Let's definitely take advantage of concept level sentiment. How do we feel about administration and resources and student behavior and communication, specific apps, the phone chargers or tablet chargers in the classroom, right? The whole spectrum of things. Like, we want to know what's working well and what's not. And recognizing that survey fatigue is a real thing, respondents got to choose which open-ended question they wanted to gravitate to. So the first one was, like, describe your strongest memory as a student, as a teacher, as a parent. That can feel really safe for folks who don't want to tell other people what to do, right? I just want to reflect. I only have enough bandwidth for my personal self. I can share a strong memory.
The word strong too doesn't mean good or bad. So strongest memory, like, you could really pull out anything there.
Evolutionarily, we kind of have this cognizant bias towards the negative, because don't touch that snake is probably more important than that berry was nice one time. It looks like other berries. Right?
True. Survival, that's a thing.
Survival is a bit. So strongest memory had a slant there. We'll recognize that. And there was also this other question of advice to new people. If someone else is stepping into your shoes as a teacher, as a student joining your school, what advice would you give them in order to be successful? Also a fairly neutral question on the surface, and insightfully very different when they say, don't go to the back of the playground and hang out at the library because the librarian's got snacks, right? And so we collected these stories and the memories of teachers following January 6th, with the pandemic, working remotely, being believed and having to work while sick, seeing what happened to the kids' economic situations, bullying, what did isolation do to the kids' development, the grades. Like, it is heavy stuff. And throughout the process, we were, in communication as the results are coming in, like, administration, you have to recognize that the staff has gone through really hard times, and they're reliving those hard times to recant to you. They're trusting you with this. Please, please, please act on it. Say that we're listening. Let's do what we can to recognize the cohesion that this offers. What can we do to say, like, it's okay to speak out and talk to us? What can we do to say, like, if you communicate a problem, we're going to mobilize to address the problems that you're facing? Balls in the air on that one. It's a fairly recent study, but it is compelling data.
And it takes a certain level of trust too when they're, the people who are filling out the surveys, the administrator and the students, are willing to trust those giving the surveys with these answers, because they're very deep, very vulnerable, and that puts, like, a lot of pressure and obligation and responsibility on the people who are taking that information, because now you have to do something with it, right? Like, they've given you their heart.
And you get that opportunity.
Leave it in a box somewhere.
Yeah, you get that opportunity, like, one time in most situations, right? It takes a lot of time to build up trust, and it does not take long to sabotage it. And that includes shutting down and avoiding things. So there's some heavy HR topics. Let's go to the pub.
Beer time.
Beer time, beer time. So people who log into Daylight, we have a standard data set on understanding beer. The beer review data set includes a lot of dimensions. There is appearance, there is smell, there is mouthfeel, there's a lot of language that goes into 50,000 beer reviews because there's a diverse spectrum of beers, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a stout or it's an IPA, you still pour it, it still has alcohol, it still has an appearance, it still has flavors. Those will naturally cluster in those kind of themed groups. And the IPA is the same thing, but the flavor cluster, the scent cluster, the words that they use to like sweet, is the sweet a citrus sweet or is the sweet a chocolate sweet? For the appearance, is it dark and like motor oil as a positive sentiment thing for the stouts versus like light and clear and cloudy or whatever the desirable trait is? It depends on the subgroup. It's relative regarding what is good in this subset versus not. And when we're collecting data, the more dimensionality we give the AI to understand what is flavor, what is motor oil. Motor oil is a look, not a taste. And so when we're collecting stories, we want to get as many angles of that thing as possible. If we think about like generating a 3D image on like, you know, some CGI generated thing, we need a lot of angles. And the AI, if it's going to understand the thing, it needs a lot of projections. And that can come from a limited variety of stories that are extremely storyful, or it can come from a huge volume of things that are maybe a bit easier. As long as the vocabulary used to describe the thing is coherent and robust, you're golden.
Yeah, and how we perceive our world is through those 5 senses. So if we can capture as many of those as we can, then we get that 3-dimensional kind of image.
One of the questions that we often face is like, when is it really a problem? When we identify a good beer, someone may mention like, it's got a bit of a funk, right?
Uh-oh.
When is it really a problem? Because there's some things that are deal breakers, and there's some things that are like, you know, minor annoyances. And whether or not that results in churn or change in behavior depends on a lot of factors. So in this example, we have, let's say we're going to a store for pickup. Like we put in a mobile order, we show up. If there's a 45-minute wait that beyond the estimated time of pickup, I'm probably not. That's a one and done deal breaker. Important to recognize. 45 minutes may result in a 1-star experience, never going back. Versus if they give me a long receipt, like if I buy a thing of chapstick and the receipt that they give me is so long, like I don't love it. I don't need or want, I can't opt in or out of the receipt coupons, but I'm not going to go to another store. I'm just going to put it in the paper recycling.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we can do when we're doing text analysis or trying to scope out how bad a problem is, we want to make sure that we're pairing sentiment and drivers and putting them together, right? If 45 minutes is coming up in a sentiment scale, it has a negative sentiment, just like the receipt's too long is, right?
Yeah.
But one of them is associated with a 1-star review and one's associated with a 5-star review because it's not really about the receipt. It's about, did I get the receipt or did I get the chapstick for the price that I wanted?
Driver is more of a decision-making factor.
Right. And you want to pair the two because we want to look out for red herrings or misnomers where maybe someone's mentioning something good and it's like, well, at least customer service was fine. Like it's a 1-star review, but at least Becky helped. And Becky may be associated with 1-star reviews, but like she's the silver lining. She's saving it. It's don't let go of Becky just because she's fixing everyone's problems. One of the real world examples that I love to gravitate to is looking at deliveries. Like if you're taking Amazon reviews, there's an implicit experience to those products that is not applicable elsewhere. If you pick up vitamin gummies from Costco, it is different than having those vitamin gummies delivered to your door, because the vitamin gummies at Costco, you see the product, you pick the one, you're not picking the one that melted into a single glob, right? But if it arrives on your porch in August and you live in Arizona,
yeah,
it doesn't stand a chance. It's gonna arrive disgusting. It's not necessarily about the product as much as the whole product's experience.
One
So
big gummy versus 200.
yeah, and the chemical compounds might have changed a bit, and the smell may have changed a bit, and the texture may have changed a bit. Like there's so many things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And that's not just for vitamin gummies, right? That's makeup. If you have food delivery services versus food pickup, there's a lot of things that arrive at people's houses now that need to be evaluated for not just the picked up experience, but for the delivered experience. And often when people experience a problem, they'll come back with suggestions. Like if you had just packed an ice pack, it would have been fine. Or if you had just rang the doorbell or communicated or texted me, I could have got out and picked it up. If I knew when it was being there, we could have prevented this problem. And people want that, right? It would improve their experience, it improves other experiences.
And they don't feel like their money is wasted. So.
Yeah. When we're talking about beer, when we're talking about retail, when we're talking about delivery experiences, there's not a lot of vulnerability required to go off on a topic. So some people will be more open to sharing the experience. I have this product. It is plastic bags. I could talk about does it contain what I need it to contain? Is it easy to tear off? Does it break when I don't need it to break? People can tell stories, but often what we're looking for is levels of deeper meaning. What is your relationship to the product? Or what is your relationship to your employer? What's your relationship with the cause? Because that's going to decide the driving behaviors.
We have a good question in the chat that's actually related to this. Someone asked, I feel like even saying the responses are anonymous does not build any more security in honest answers. What do you think?
It usually depends on the topic, right? Like how intimate are you getting? There's some things like a relationship with an employer that if it's anonymous, but it's going directly through the employer and not through a third party, and even then the third party is likely commissioned by the parent company. If there is a skepticism to communicate, there may already be a history or a record of building that distrust. And sometimes it just takes time to repair that relationship.
Yeah.
In the culture that we had with the school district, they will probably have to echo back what they're hearing, make meaningful changes, and that way there's a clear correlation between this problem won't get fixed unless I say something, and it is safe to say something, right? There's a multifacet. If someone's trying to disclose something about their personal lives, like their intimate care needs, or something that may be taboo, there's different approaches that researchers can take, like humor, candidness. It depends on the relationship of the researcher and the respondent, what kind of feedback you can get. There's things that I'm going to talk about with Ashe that I may not talk about with other coworkers, depending on what we have in common and what we don't have in common. Anonymity goes part of the way, but there's still the perception of who's reading it and how much we're willing to disclose, given culture and society has biases, right? We see it in the performance reviews. Not everything is intentionally kept secret. Some things are just reading the room and responding with the limited bandwidth we have.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Yeah, and that ties in really well to the next bit of one of the most vulnerable things that we can tap into, the things that if we can get people to reflect on their personal identities and their communities. I have some iconography around me on my desk that signals pretty clearly part of my identity pieces and part of my community pieces. If people know that they are representing their community, and there's that altruistic of I may be the only person with my intersections at the discussion table, and I know there are others that I need to look out for. Sometimes people will disclose that. There's sometimes a herd mentality, well, they're asking everyone, someone else will probably say it, and the responsibility is shared. We've all been copied on emails, hi team, do this thing. There's 20 people copied, and everyone's right, no one gets to it, right? Yeah. Versus if there is hi Ashe, can you do this thing? please reach out to the copied team for support and assistance as we all work together on this. Designating a point person can result in different activity than if it's vague and anonymous.
Yep.
Representation and that identification does matter, and it does result in different things. The image associated with this slide is of, PC gaming chairs. Gamers are a fantastic group for storyful feedback, because a game is a product, but it's also an immersive experience. It's an identity. If you're an Animal Crossing player versus a Halo player versus an Assassin's Creed player, like, you're all gamers, but there's a different lingo associated with each piece. You can tap into identity, if you can tap into community mindedness, sometimes that gets us around the storyful need. Even if it's not innately vulnerable, it can get us to the storyful bits and get us to those actionable insights and those actionable takeaways that we need to do something to make life better for everybody. There's so many ways when you have an AI that learns like a human to utilize that. I like this use case so much that I did my best to replicate it and doing it for Luminoso internally. And we're not a big team. We're a very small team, and it's been helpful. Ashe has benefited from it. Like, if you need to look up something, we have a solution. This application of technical troubleshooting, let's pretend there's a car going down the manufacturing line, right? And there's a rattling in the front left corner. And I'm like, ugh, okay. There's a rattling. What could be loose here? I'm going to check this piece and this piece. I'm going to tighten this piece. I'm describing the problem. And then I figured it out. It took me 6 hours to figure out, like, where's this rattling coming from? It only happens when it goes over 60 miles an hour. And then I described the solution. I found what it was. This is how I fixed it. Submit it, put it in the database. Now I've been promoted. I'm doing other things. I'm managing elsewhere. And Ashe is in my seat, right? And this car comes down and there's something off in the left corner. And Ashe is going to describe it a little bit differently. Like, it's clinking like a tin can. I didn't use the word clinking like a tin can. I said it was rattling. And so Ashe will describe it. The technical troubleshooting takes the conceptual matches, like clinking, rattling, like we've been used, like when we're describing the problem, we may be using them synonymously or in conjunction with each other, developing conceptual matches. And then daylight's like, okay, you have these terms that are related. This solution document is most associated with that description of the problem. Try that first.
Yep.
And then it's on Ashe to describe how Ashe solved it, because maybe Ashe solved it differently to different results. And now the database is that much more comprehensive. You can imagine how iteratively over time, the manufacturing process troubleshooting gets so much faster.
If you've ever tried to troubleshoot like a computer problem or something on your phone and you're trying to Google, the problem, and you keep getting the wrong, suggestions coming up, and so you try to phrase it a different way until you finally get what you're looking for. Oh, that problem matches everybody's run into that. So having the AI make those leaps for you is super valuable and saves a lot of time.
Because there's a difference between more answers and the right answer. We just want the information that is applicable. Life is too short to do everything the hard way. Why AI helps us. So the way we've been using this internally with Luminoso is we are collecting stories, use cases, applications, learnings, kind of like what we covered earlier today. All of those stories, we've been pooling them together. Organizations and causes are not intended to have infinite person-brain associations. People need to do different things to be happy. People need to be promoted and try new challenges, gather new stories. Onboarding takes forever, right? How many onboarding sessions does it take for someone to understand a product or an offering or approaches or methodologies? We put ours into daylight, so that way when we have new salespeople who are like, hey, I am now selling a product that is different than anything I've sold before. How does the math work? What is unique to filter used for? How have we helped employees? How have we used product reviews? Do we have chatbot experience? how do we handle emojis? All of it's in there. Thanks everyone for attending. It was good to see you all. Reach out if you have any questions, suggestions, or clarifications. We are happy to talk to you, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks, everybody.